The Battle of Antioch on the Meander was a military engagement near Antioch on the Meander between the forces of the Empire of Nicaea and the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. The Turkish defeat ensured continued Nicaean hegemony of the Aegean coast of Asia Minor. The Seljuk Sultan, Kakis was killed on the field of battle. The battle took place near the modern town of Yamalak in Kayukik district in Aydın province. Background: following the capture of Constantinople by the forces of the Fourth Crusade and the partition of the Byzantine Empire, Theodore Lascaris, crowned emperor in 1208, built up a power base in the former Byzantine territory of Western Anatolia. This new polity was to become known as the Empire of Nicaea. Nicaea was one of the two main Greek successor states that claimed the heritage of the Byzantine Empire, along with Epirus in western Greece. Nicaea was threatened from the north by the new Latin Empire established by the Crusaders, and from the east by the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. The peace with the Seljuks was disturbed through the arrival, in early 1211, of the former Byzantine Emperor Alexios III, in the port of Attaleia. The subsequent events are described in some detail by a number of near-contemporary sources, chiefly the chroniclers Ibn al-Athir and Ibn Bibi on the Seljuk side, and the histories of George Acropolites and Nicephorus Gregoris on the Byzantine side, as well as references in other chroniclers and the orations in honor of Theodore Lascaris by Nitas Choniates. Alexios had fled Constantinople on the approach of the Crusaders in 1203, but had not given up on his rights to the throne, and was determined to reclaim it. In 1203 to 1205 he had wandered across Greece seeking the support of powerful local grandees, before being captured by Boniface of Montferrat and held captive until ransomed by his first cousin, Michael of Epirus, in 1210. Although Theodore Lascaris was Alexios's son-in-law, having married his daughter Anna, Alexios resolved to seek the aid of the Seljuk Sultan Kakis I, with whom he had close relations. Alexios had sheltered him in Constantinople during the latter's exile, and George Acropolites claims that the two fled from Constantinople together in 1203. The Sultan welcomed Alexios warmly, and the deposed emperor, after reminding the Sultan of the succor he had given him, promised him rich rewards if he would help restore him to his throne. Kakis, having found in supporting Alexios's cause a perfect pretext for attacking Nicaean territory, sent an emissary to Theodore at Nicaea calling upon him to relinquish his domains to the legitimate emperor. Theodore refused to reply to the Sultan's demands, and the Sultan assembled his army and invaded Lascaris's domains. Battle. Kakis' army, and Alexios III in tow, laid siege to Antioch on the Meander, which he hoped to use as a base to subdue the rest of the Meander Valley. The size of the Seljuk force is unknown. The hagiographer George of Pelagonia in his hagiography estimates it at 60,000, clearly an impossible figure, and even Gregoris's 20,000 seem to be exaggerated. Nevertheless, it was clearly a considerably larger force than the army Theodore managed to scrape together. Both Gregoris and Acropolites put it at 2,000 men, of whom 800 were Latin and the rest Byzantine Greeks. Lascaris marches his army from Nicaea over the Mysian Olympus and reached Philadelphia in 11 days. There he learned that Antioch was about to fall, and led his army in a forced march towards the town, discarding all baggage except for a few days' rations. According to Gregoris, Lascaris intended to catch the Turks off guard by his rapid approach, but Acropolites relates that the Nicaean ruler sent Kakis' ambassador, whom he had taken along, to inform his master of his arrival. The Sultan at first appeared incredulous, but eventually abandoned the siege and drew up his forces for battle. The Turks were constrained by the narrowness of the valley and could not deploy their full forces, especially their cavalry. Hence the Sultan decided to await the Nicaean attack instead. As the Nicaean army drew close to the Turks, Lascaris' Latin mercenary cavalry launched an impetuous charge on the Turkish center. Their attack caused many casualties to the Turks, in particular the lightly armed archers and slingers, as the knights drove through their formation and then wheeled back and charged it again from the rear. Khosrow, however, soon managed to restore discipline among his troops, shaken by the sudden Latin onslaught, and used his superior numbers to surround and annihilate the Latins. The Turks then turned on the rest of the Nicaean army, which, after suffering casualties, began to retreat and break up. As the sources narrate, at this moment of victory, the Seljuk Sultan sought out Lascaris, who was hard-pressed by the attacking Turkish troops. Khosrow charged his enemy and gave him a heavy blow on the head with a mace, so that the Nicaean emperor, dizzied, fell from his horse. Khosrow was already giving orders to his retinue to carry Lascaris away, when the latter regained his composure and brought Khosrow down by hacking at his mount's rear legs. The Sultan too fell on the ground and was beheaded. His head stuck on top of a lance and waved about, causing the Turks to panic and retreat. It is unclear who delivered the fatal blow to the Sultan. Choniates and Gregoras attribute this deed to Lascaris himself, Ibn Bibi to an unknown Frankish mercenary. Acropolite says that neither the emperor nor his attendants saw who did this, while George of Pelagonia claims that Khosrow and not Lascaris was unhorsed first, and that one of the emperor's attendants cut off his head. Though the Turks retreated, allegedly at speed, the Nicaean army was so depleted in numbers that it could not mount a pursuit. Aftermath. In this way Lascaris snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, although his own army was well nigh destroyed in the process. The battle ended the Seljuk threat. Khosrow's son and successor, Khosrau, concluded a truce with Nicaea on 14 June 1211, and the border between the two states would remain virtually unchallenged until the 1260s. The former emperor Alexios, Lascaris' father-in-law, was also captured during the battle. Lascaris treated him well, but stripped him of his imperial insignia and consigned him to the monastery of Hyrcanthos in Nicaea, where he ended his days. Following the battle, the Turks carried the body of their sultan back to Konya, where he was buried in the dynastic mausoleum. Ibn Bibi relates that Theodore Lascaris gave 20,000 dirhams to be distributed at the sultan's funeral as alms. The battle freed Nicaea from Seljuk pressure, but Lascaris' army had suffered heavy casualties. In particular, his very effective, though headstrong, Latin mercenary cavalry had been almost destroyed. As a result, Lascaris could not adequately defend his territory from an attack by the Latin Empire of Constantinople, defeated at the Battle of the Rindicus. He had to cede some territory bordering the Sea of Marmara. The Nicaeans were compensated for this territorial loss when, in 1212, the death of David Komnenos allowed their annexation of his lands in Paphlagonia. The victory at Antioch on the Meander gave Lascaris considerable prestige, and the capture of Alexios ended internal opposition to his rule. The battle was the last major encounter between the Seljuks and the Byzantines. Ultimately, the Seljuks had failed to take all of Asia Minor. However, even though the Nicaean Empire would strengthen and the Seljuks would weaken, the Turks, under Ottoman leadership, would ultimately conquer Byzantine Asia Minor a little over 100 years later.